In 2005, I was sitting out back on the back stairs behind my house, and it started to rain. I'm talking on a cordless phone, and I heard thunder and then a loud crack and the lightning bolt. I saw it come out of the sky and it hit my right arm. And after it did that, it passed through my body and it traveled underneath the house and it hit the transformer in front of our house. And when the lightning hit me, I felt this burning, searing, agonizing pain that lasted for only a minute, but it seemed like eternity. It was so painful. And then all of a sudden, I'm peeling up out of my body, just peeling right up out of myself. And I found myself going into the house. And at this time, I did not know I was dead. So I'm walking through my house and I'm in the kitchen and I look around and everything has a burnt gold look to it. And as I'm looking around, I see the curtains on the windows by the sink. And I noticed that those curtains weren't my curtains. And I continued to look around and I noticed that the dining room furniture wasn't my furniture. And I was very confused at the moment. I had no idea that I was dead still. And I didn't know that was my house, but I didn't know whose furniture it was. I knew how to get around in the house. The rooms all looked the same, but the furniture was all different. And just about the time that I started to panic, there was this huge, loving presence that was with me. And he filled me full of just the deep sense of love and compassion. And I was no longer afraid. And we started moving very quickly sideways. We did not move up, we didn't move down, we went laterally. And we started moving very quickly through these beautiful pink and gold clouds. And as we got to the end of the clouds, there was this magnificent garden. And just as we got to the entrance of the garden, there were these two young men that stepped forward. And at first, I thought that they were angels because they were just literally glowing. And then it hit me that it wasn't, they weren't angels. They were my two brothers who had died when they were babies. And I was only a baby myself, so I didn't, I'd never met them, but it was an instant knowing. And we had this wonderful family reunion with the hugs and the tears. And I was so happy to see them. And I kept telling them that they looked just like dad and that dad would be so proud of them. So as we were talking and, hugging and having our reunion, we were walking further into the garden. And I noticed that I could feel the grass on my feet and it was soft. The air was sweet and crisp, and the colors were so rich and so vibrant. And then there were colors that I didn't even have names for. And as we're walking further into the garden, I noticed that there was a whole bunch of people that gathered around me, and they were from all different time periods. Some of the women were in these beautiful gowns, and some of the men were in fancy suits, and then there were other people that were dressed in different types of clothes. They were from all different time periods, and I knew who they were, and they knew me, but I didn't know where I knew them from. And everyone that I saw was glowing. They were literally glowing, sort of from the inside out. And I didn't see anyone that was over the age of late 20s, early 30s. There were no old people, no sick people, nobody crying, nobody in pain or suffering. As everybody was gathering around me, this huge loving presence that was beside me moved from beside me to behind me. And then my two brothers were one on either side of me. And then all these other people gathered around. And it was time for my life review. It was like a screen had come down, and I was watching this old fashioned movie on an old fashioned movie reel. And it was moving very quickly, and it was my life, from the time I was a baby until the time I died that day in the backyard. And I watched it, and it seemed like it was over really, really fast. And I had no sense of judgment. I had no sense of anything except I thought it was really short, and I thought, wow, something's missing, and my life must have been really boring because that was over very quick. I'd always been taught that there was judgment, and that did not happen. There was no judgment. I was just loved so completely, and I was so accepted, and I had never experienced any of that before, and it was just such huge love. And so I learned God didn't judge me. That huge loving presence that was behind me was what as I knew was God. And then my brothers and all of those people, they just loved me. There wasn't anybody judging me or condemning me or anything like that. And then I heard a male voice say, "What you put out into the universe will come back to you." And I had never heard words like that before, so I didn't know what that meant. And there was a sense of like I was hooked up to a giant IV bottle of knowledge. It was like having one aha moment after another. I was being infused with this divine wisdom and this knowledge at that point. And I was in shock over it. I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And I kept saying this, oh my God, you are so awesome. You're so cool. Because he was showing me who he was, what he was, how the universe was put together, and that it was all very simple. And we human beings make everything so complicated. And it wasn't complicated at all. And one of the things that was shown to me was what those words, what you put out into the universe, will come back to you, what that meant. And the way he was kind of showing it to me was using a boomerang. And so I call it the boomerang effect. So what you say and what you think and what you do, your actions go out into the universe, it spins and gains momentum and gets bigger and stronger, and eventually that boomerang is going to come back and get you. So if you put out love and you put out kindness and compassion and acceptance and all of those wonderful things, and those are the things that'll come back to you. But if you put out lying and stealing and cheating and all of those things, that's what's going to come and get you. That was a life changing lesson for me. When I came back, I realized I need to really be careful what I say, and I don't want to hurt anyone ever. And so I'm very careful about what I say and what I do. And then I continued looking around, and it was like the most magnificent spring day. The sky was this beautiful blue. I noticed there was a sphere in the sky. It looked like the moon, maybe, or the sun without any light, because the light wasn't coming from a sun. The light was coming from God, the heart of God. And that's what I realized when I looked around. Everything had this glow. Now, my brothers had, they were the ones that told me that I had died. And I thought, wow, okay, I can do this. If with all this beauty and all this love and acceptance and everything, I thought, okay, I can do this. And I wasn't afraid. But when they told me I had died, I looked down the front of me and I could see my hair going down the front of me, and I could see my clothes, and I could see my feet, and I had a body, but it was a light body. It wasn't heavy or weighed down by the trauma of the world or gravity or anything like that. It was very light and very bright, and I was glowing just like everybody else was glowing, but I still had an identity. I was still me. I thought like me, I felt like me, I looked like me, only a better version. We just kept walking through the garden, and I noticed this beautiful, what I call the glorious city. And it was kind of off in the distance to the left a little bit from where I was standing. And there was a golden wall that surrounded the city. And that must have been the barrier. I couldn't go beyond that point. And I saw buildings on the outskirts of the city, and they were made of the most beautiful alabaster, this white marble, and you very intricately carved. And there were archways and columns. I saw a place where babies and children go when they die, and there where I saw children, and there were various ages and stages, and they were running around laughing and playing, and they are cared for by people who have passed on before them, relatives. And then I saw another building, and it kind of looked like maybe a spiritual hospital of some sort. But outside of this particular building, there were healing pools of what looked like living water. It was for people who had died traumatic deaths, or victims, or people who died very quickly. And I saw this other building, and it looked like this magnificent library. It was full of books from the ceiling to the floor, just a bazillion books on every subject you could possibly want to know. And the inside of that building looked like it had this deep, rich mahogany bookshelves and ladders that you could move around, that you could climb up to get the books on the top. I mean, it was huge. And I called it the Hall of Knowledge, but I'm not sure if that's what it was really called. And then my brothers and I continued walking, and there was a grove of trees over in the corner. People ask me all the time, what were those trees? And I don't know what kind of trees they were, but I saw Jesus coming out of the grove of trees, and he walked up to me. And when he walked up to me, my two brothers disappeared. I have no idea where they went. And so he smiled at me, and I was just in awe of him. He was so beautiful. And he said to me, and this was my first clue that I was going to be sent back, but it went over my head. I didn't pick up on it, but he said to me, I love you. I'm with you. Don't be afraid. And then he walked with me over to this beautiful wooded glen. And there was a stream. And next to the stream, there was a log that was laying down on the ground. And I could see the pine cones and the pine needles. And there were these little blue flowers that were popping up through the pine needles. And I sat down on the log. And when I did, Jesus walks away. And there was a man sitting on the other end of the log. And I knew that man was God. He had this stick, and he was kind of playing with the pine needles or doodling in the grass or ground or dirt or whatever. And he looked over at me, and he said, what would you do if it was just me and you? And I was like, what? I didn't understand the question. And he smiled at me, and he said, what would you do if it was just me and you? And I still didn't get the question. He smiled at me again, and he stood up and he said, come with me. So I got up, and we walked further into the wooded glen, and there was a clearing. And at the clearing, he kind of waved his hand. And when he did that, the sky kind of opened up, and I could see the vastness of the universe. I could see the rainbow colored gases and the spinning planets and the sparkling stars. But there weren't any people. There were no trees, no cars, no houses, nothing. It was just all of that. And so I looked at God and I said, no, because if it's all of that and me and you would be tired of me after the first 10 minutes, and you wouldn't like me anymore because of all of my questions and my chatter. And he threw his head back, and when he did, his eyes sparkled like diamonds. And his laugh was very infectious. And so I started laughing at myself, and I thought, oh my word, what a thing to say to God. You can tell God no. So we went back and we sat back on the log. And he asked me again. He said, "What would you do if it was just me and you? No parents, no husband, no children, no friends, nobody, just me and you." Well, I still didn't know how to properly answer that question. And so there was this beautiful oak tree that was in front of me, and it was probably a bazillion years old. It was huge. And I noticed the detail of the bark, and I noticed the roots beneath the ground, and I could see the roots pulling the nutrients out of the soil, and the nutrients go up through the tree and into the leaves, and I could see the veins and the life-giving veins in the leaves, and that the nutrients and the light provide food for the leaves, and the leaves clean the air, and we breathe the air. And so everything is connected to and very dependent upon everything else. So it doesn't matter how tiny God's creation is, it's very, very important to all of creation. And I said to God, and I don't know why I said this, because I've never read the Quran in my life. I don't never picked it up. I've never seen it. But for some reason, I said, "God, your 100th name in the Quran is God is everywhere, God is nowhere, and God is in me." And he said, "Yes, that's right." And then I said, "God, you made this tree. You are in this tree. So when I see this tree, I see you." He said, "Yes, that's right." Then I started thinking about my parents, and I said, "God, you made my parents. You are in my parents. So when I see my parents, I see you." And he said, "Yes, that's right." Well, then I said the same thing about my children. And then I started thinking about certain people who had been very cruel and had hurt me in my life. And I said, "God, there are people in this world that are very cruel and they hurt other people." I said, "But you made those people. You are in those people. So when I see those people, I see you." He said, "Yeah, that's right." He said, "Now I have a question for you." And I thought, oh my. And so he asked me. He said, "When you look in the mirror, what do you see?" And I kind of put my hands in my lap and kind of looked down, because my answer I knew was not the right answer that you give God. My answer normally would have been just me, nobody else, just me. That's it. But I didn't think that that was the proper thing to say. So I said, "God, you made me. You are in me. So when I look in the mirror, I see you." And he was so happy. He was like, "Yeah, that's right. That's right." And his eyes just sparkled. They were the bluest blue I had ever seen, and they just sparkled like diamonds when he smiled. Now, when I saw Jesus, his eyes were brown. So when I said that, God was letting me know, I don't make mistakes. I don't make junk, and you are not all of the things that the people on this world has told you to believe you are. I had my whole adult life, I was told I was fat, I was ugly, I was stupid, and I was believing it. And God was saying, "No, I didn't make you that way. You are not all the things that the world tells you you are." And it was such a huge revelation in my mind that I was not all of those things, that God did not see me that way. We talked a little bit more, and then these two angels came over to me, and they did not have wings. They were in these beautiful, ornate dresses, and they took me to this very calm lake. It was like looking at glass. And I leaned over and I looked into the water. And when I did that, I could see the earth below. And I saw future world events. I saw things happening on the earth in different parts of the earth. I saw lots of terrible weather changes, volcanoes and all of that, earthquakes and tsunamis and all of that kind of thing. But I saw really dark clouds, or what looked like clouds, over top of different capitals of the governments in different parts of the world. And then I saw riots and people overthrowing governments. And I was shown that our money system is going to collapse. In fact, the angel said that our money is not worth it, and was told that eventually we would be going back to the barter system as we did years ago. And there was a lot more, but basically, I didn't understand why I was being shown this, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do about it. The angel said that these things do not have to happen, that it is human collective selfishness that is causing these things to happen, and humankind can change, and if we change, these things will not happen. But so far we haven't changed, and the things I saw have happened. And then after that, I was sent back to my body, and I remember waking up next to the stairs, and the stairs that I was sitting on had char marks, black char marks on them where I was sitting, and the phone I was talking on was charred black, and it was across the yard. And when I got back into my body, it was the most painful thing. It was horrific. Just that burning, searing, agonizing, horrible pain that was in my arm and going across my chest. And I have medical documentation of I have a right bundle branch block in my heart, and I have a seizure condition from the lightning strike. So that's basically that's it.